Okay, so we're going to be looking at some of the equipment that you'll be using, and we'll be naming it. We're using a site that is easily accessible on the internet called kayakpaddling.net. So if you wanted to come back to this site, you can quite easily do so. But as part of your assessment, you will be required to know all the parts of your kayak and all the parts of all the extra equipment that we use, and you will be required to demonstrate this in a video sequence where you sort of talk about the gear you're using. So let's start with the paddler, and you can see in this on this website they talk about the life vest, but this is actually classified as a PFD, and you can see even in this picture that there is no headrest on the back of that PFD that the paddler's wearing there. And so for it to be a life vest, it would require a sort of pillow at the back here that would enable the paddler's head to be held up if they were unconscious in the water. So when we're kayaking or on any unmotorized craft, all we really need is a PFD, and so that's kind of what this paddler's wearing there. It's really important not to get that terminology mixed up when you're doing your safety talk or your equipment talk. So obviously we wear a PFD every time we paddle. The second thing we might wear, and if we're on sit on top, we probably won't wear this, but if we're in an enclosed style kayak, be it white water or sea kayaking kayak, you'll be wearing a spray skirt, and it's a simple neoprene skirt that goes underneath your PFD, the top of it, and then goes around the cockpit coaming there. So you can see the cockpit coaming, and in fact you can see in this picture here the cockpit itself. So the inside internal area where the paddler's sitting is actually the cockpit, and that has a number of different safety features and things inside it which are really important. The first and really the most important one in a kayak of this size is the bulkhead, and this picture doesn't actually have it so we can break it down, but you can see here just below the paddler's feet there and behind his back there's and you'll notice in your own kayak that there's a large piece of foam. This breaks the kayak down into 3 compartments. So the bulkheads make the kayak, are a safety feature of the kayak, and they stop it from sinking. So if this hatch was to open up and fill up with water, then the bulkhead will stop the water coming into this cockpit, and we'll still have some air in there and it'll float. If for some reason the whole kayak was to fill up with water, the foam bulkheads will still ensure that it stays afloat and that there's some air in there. So it makes it reasonably almost impossible to sink. Another safety feature of kayaks is the deck lines. Now if you're to fall out or you need to sort of crawl along the kayak, they're there for you as a safety feature to hang on to. They're also there, I guess you can see the deck lines here are there for stowing some equipment, but in general you want to keep your deck pretty clean and not stow too much equipment up in those ropes. Obviously if we've got watertight hatches, that's going to mean that our front compartment here and our rear compartment aren't going to fill up with water as we're paddling. If you're touring, doing some longer stuff, this is obviously where your gear's going to go, so you really want to keep that dry. So watertight hatches are pretty handy. And the toggles, again, that's a safety feature that you can hang on to on any sort of canoe or kayak. They're also really good for carrying a kayak when you've got 2 people, one at each end to carry the kayak. You can see just a bit of orientation with the boat now. We've got the bow or the front end, and this is really boat terminology, but at the back here we've got the stern, and you can, even if you want to go even further into boat terminology, The left side of the boat here would be called the port side. And in a kayak, you're probably not going to use port or stern. Excuse me.